30. She was in grade 4. So she was 9 years old and now she's 30.
Does this sound loud to you? You can hear, see, we can't, there's no feedback up here anymore, so we sound like we're whispering up here.
Oh, really?
She has a baby and she's
Remember, I can
another
see
one.
you all.
I'm like,
Okay.
Mom said that she was
Testing, testing. Wow, yeah.
Sometimes if you don't sit close enough to the mic, I can generally hear you.
Yeah, it's good.
But I can't read it.
It's hard to believe when you're here.
It's so quiet up there, huh? Good job. Nice people.
Where's our Steve?
Did the old,
Did you put it, this was changed too, wasn't it? More sound, is that what's changed? This week?
more cameras to watch the fire?
Sure, I'd sit back there, the camera's up there.
Okay, since this is not a council meeting, it's a budget discussion, why don't we proceed? And, Director Smith, would you like to give us a quick overview or get right into the meat of the matter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief update, if I can. So there was some discussion at our last meeting on September 7th with regards to the, I guess, more format of the actual six-year capital plan. So we have tried to make some refinements to that plan, or to the format, whereby we have provided, or at least tried to provide, information as it relates to the funding of each project, not necessarily dollar value per se, but at least how it's funded, whether it be from a reserve or taxation or DCs or whatever the case may be. And so what we tried to do is if you look at if I look at the handout that I provided to everybody, so you should have 4 pages to the handout. The first 2 pages are what will are the more detailed capital projects of the six-year capital plan, and then the third page is the items that we'd received from council, individual councilors regarding certain requests that be considered to be included in the six-year capital plan. And then the last page is the information that was provided by the deputy mayor that has not been released to the general public just due to some of the items on there that still need some discussion with council. So that's the information that's been provided to you. Again, the format, we did try to include additional columns, if you will, for the funding of each project. We did try to, within the funding source categories, if you will, so if you look at the first page, under growth-related projects, funding sources, we have taxation, and then in brackets we have the letter capital T, similarly for reserves, capital letter R, and those indications, or those letters are to indicate, to relate back to the funding column. So R means reserves, T means taxation, so on and so forth. So hopefully that addresses the concern that was raised at our last meeting. So one other thing, or a couple other things, I guess, is that all projects in the six-year capital plan, so how we develop the capital plan is that we do take a look at the funding that's available to us. And so typically we will not include a project in the six-year capital plan if we don't have the funding. With that said, the default is if we have a project and we don't have the funding and it's a large project, usually we will propose debt, and or it falls out as taxation, and or it doesn't go in the six-year capital plan. So we do try to make sure that every project is funded. As the Municipal Act dictates, we have to have a balanced budget, and so we do have to come up with funding sources for each of these projects. So I wanted to kind of clarify that. Really, the objective of today is to really try to get some consensus from council. I know it's a working session, but at least try to get some idea from all members of council as to the projects that are currently slated on the six-year capital plan. Do you agree with them? Do you want some removed? Do you want some added? Do you want us to rejig some of the numbers up or down? Do you want us to move some of the projects to a different year? Essentially, that's what we're looking for, is we're looking for some kind of sense, if you will, from council as a whole as to have we hit the mark or are we way off the mark? And so with that said, the items that, that are potentially to be added to the plan. That's on page 3 and 4, I guess, that of the handout. And those can, obviously, we're looking for some further discussion from members of council as to whether you want some of those included. And we haven't included them in our 6-year capital plan because, with all due respect, it may only be one request of a councillor, and we want to make sure that the majority of council is on board before we actually put it in the 6-year capital plan. So with that said, we did, sorry, I got a friend here. We did go through the municipal building section a couple of meetings ago. We have made some refinements to it. We have moved, and I know this came up at the last council meeting, we have moved some projects from the capital budget to the actual operating budget. And if I can take a minute to clarify, what we're doing is we have, from a financial reporting standpoint within a municipality, we have thresholds, capitalization thresholds. And so if they don't meet those capitalization thresholds, then simply they're considered to be in an operating expense. So, for example, the painting of a structure is more of a maintenance item. It's included in our operating budget. So some of those items have been moved. I know there was some conversation about the Midhurst recreation provisional item, and really you'll see it on page 2. We've included back in the capital budget. The idea is that nothing's being planned at this stage for that. No direction has been provided, and so really it's an outstanding item. We don't know, is it capital, is it not capital at this stage? From a financial reporting side of things, when we do our audit, it requires us to tweak some numbers, if you will, by us continuing to include it in the capital budget. So in some regards, I think I want to have some more discussion about that. If we're going to do something, then with all due respect, let's put something in the budget and get it done. And then we can determine whether it's truly a capital item and or an operating expense. Try not to confuse you even more, but even with the capitalization of assets, we do have a number of assets that are truly capital in nature, if you will, like office furniture, for example. But when we look at a building, for example, the way we've classified a building or a facility in our financial reporting is it's a whole asset. So the roof, the structure, everything is considered one asset for financial reporting purposes. So when we go ahead and we put in a new furnace or something like that, we aren't capturing that as, we're capturing that as a maintenance item as opposed to a capital item. And when we get into our asset management plan and we dive in deeper, and I know this came up at the last meeting, we need to dive deeper into our asset management plan and provide at a much lower detail, and that will start to change how we actually show things on our financial reports or our financial statements. But when PSAB was implemented in 2009, we simply were trying to be compliant with PSAB, and you could capture facilities, for example, at a whole asset or components. We decided to go with a whole asset. So that's why some of those items that you see in a building would typically be put into the operating budget. But there's also a dollar threshold as well we consider. So with all that said, I guess I would like to kind of dive into the projects that we have in front of us. Again, we did discuss municipal buildings. The Fire Station 2 item project 2016-02, which is the first item on the first page. That has come to council. We have received, staff has received direction to date. We simply have put in an additional $50,000 in 2017 to ensure that we have the $800,000 maximum, if you will.
Councillor McConkey. Do you want to put the microphone on?
Yeah, I have a lot of concerns on the fire station because I do not see it going anywhere else for the funding. After the motion that night, my interpretation is that this was just, we were going to do the temporary building, but we were going to continue with the new building, and we were keeping at the same speed. It wasn't that we had to wait for the 7 years, because we know that Parks and Recs and them are going to use it, so the commitment to our firefighters was that we're continuing to go net new. So I see in this budget that there's no continuation of net new. I don't know when. And I see that in 2017, we better get going. And I was sort of, through discussion that evening, I was in the interpretation that we would be getting shovels, we would still be looking towards where the location was. And if we found a location, we would be starting with shovels and continue so I have difficulties when I see nothing in fire and I see recreation in 2019. And as many of you know, I've made this my priority, and so I cannot accept it.
It was my understanding that the resolution that was passed is that, aside from the funding, we were going to look at possible locations. I don't think we talked about if we find it, we build a new one. CAO Brindley, if you want to comment?
Mayor French, two things. One is if we're not at the next item, the item number 7, which talks about this farther down, and maybe it's a question of timing, what the treasurer has done is put it earmarked here for now. Once we get the property, then we can talk about timing, and those kind of things are something that we will talk to council about as we get the parcel, as we start assembling. What Mr. Schmidt has done is essentially earmarked a number at a certain time, but if it's 2021 or whether it's 2019, then depends on council at that time. Right now, we just want it in our horizon, and then we can move, and definitely Councilor McConkie can speak to this, and if she wants more comfort in terms of where that is, I'll leave it up to this committee. But that's why it's where it is right now.
So there is a placeholder. Now, do you want to do this, not sure if we can do it by resolution, but I know what we've done in previous budgets. We just kind of say, yes, we want to move it in a particular thing and get support or not support from council, so we at least put it in a particular placeholder. Are you looking for that guidance?
Well, we're definitely looking for some guidance as to, Councillor McConkie has voiced her opinion, if you will, and with all due respect, Ms. Councillor McConkie. I guess it's the majority of council. Is the majority of council on board with what you're seeing? If you are, a nod up vertically, if you will, and we'll move on, if you will. But if the majority of council is not, then staff would like to obviously have the discussion now, so that we're not coming to you in November and with something that you're not in agreement with. So the intent is we've started these working sessions to try to build some consensus, so that when it comes time to actually tabling the budget in November, we've done some homework, if you will, as it relates to capital. There still will be the operating component, and we've scheduled those meetings in December and potentially others in January to finish up the budget. So
So we're looking at two things here, obviously the 6-year capital.
Correct.
And then more specifically the 2017 capital, because that's going to come out of the budget.
correct.
And again, yeah, we put a placeholder in 2021. Is there a desire, for the sake of argument, to move it to 2019 and then we'll review it next year? If we don't have land, we'll move it out to 2021? Like, is there an interest in moving
Yeah.
to 2019?
18. I'd like to have it back to 2018.
Yeah,
I think that it sends a message
Yeah.
again. Like, I mean, this is
Yeah.
us saying we're pushing it back again and again, and I'd like to have it back to where it's in
2018.
2018, and, that would give us an opportunity to prepare for it, to budget for
Yeah.
it.
Deputy Mayor Allen?
We had talked about the possibility of co-locating. The co-locating timeframe, as I've said before, is 2021 area. If we put it 2018, then we're saying as a council that we're budgeting to have that expenditure potentially occur in that year. And if the co-location is still a possibility, that's not in sync with the understanding with respect to that from a time frame perspective.
It will be built if we put the money into 2018, it will be built and ready for them to co-locate. And that's the discussions that took place that evening. And I think if you read the report, it led to believe that we're still going forward with that. So anyways, it's my interpretation. It's what I stood for that evening. And so I put a motion on the floor that, and I think I've got Councillor Coghlan to second it, that we move Fire Station 2, the construction and furnishings of the 2 million right up to 2018.
For clarification from the clerk, since this isn't a county meeting, can we be tabling resolutions?
You just said we had to pass motions to change it, or Jeff did.
No.
Sorry, for clarification, you're just looking for something that the county might have passed and to see if the town...
No, actually, the question is, to move things around in this, I think Director Smith said, by the look of the nod of the heads, move it around. And what being attempted here is tabling a resolution, except we're not sitting as a council, so can we?
No resolutions
Okay.
can be...
Okay. So, Deputy Mayor Allen.
Again, I repeat, the purpose of the schedule, as I understand it, is to indicate as best possible when we plan to make those expenditures.
And that's what I'm saying.
So the expenditure for Fire Hall, if we are going to go ahead with the co-location, my understanding was going to be in the 220, 221 period. So to put it forward to 218, I think sends the artificial message that people think that money will be spent for a new fire hall in that particular year. And that's not logically how the co-locating possibility would progress from the information we have presently.
Okay, there's been a suggestion to move 2018 with a nod of the head. Who's in favor of that, so we can give some guidance to where to put it in a placeholder? Sure we can, because we're not sitting as a council. Well, he wants guidance. That's what he wants.
Yeah, the intent of these working sessions is, again, to try to get some consensus from council. I know you're not sitting as council, and I know you cannot make a resolution. It's to have the dialogue and to give council, or give staff some sense of where staff is, or where council is on these particular projects. Obviously, for this particular item, it appears that, not sure we're going to get that. At that stage, I guess, instead of maybe continuing with the same conversation as we move on to a different project, and the conversation continues when the budget is actually tabled. With all due respect, we have a number of projects
Sure.
that we're going to try to go through, and this is the second or third kick at the can, if you will, and we really haven't been able to get any, if you will, amendments, if you will, or changes to this plan.
Yeah.
So-
Okay. My suggestion is maybe to move this along, because when we table the budget, we can pass resolutions to move things around.
Correct.
We can do that.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is, instead of kind of moving them around now, we should be adding items that we think we want. Please, I have the floor. And so we at least plug them in, and then when we get to tabling the budget, we can finalize it, so at least you have some guidance of where things may happen. CEO Brindley?
Mayor French, similar, I thought that what we can do is write notes based on the comments today, being that Councillor McConkey mentioned, and Councillor Coghlan mentioned the 2018. We can take the comments from the Deputy Mayor, we can encapsulate those, and then keep moving through these items in terms of what the ideas are. But maybe I would recommend, instead of working sessions in the future, we have special meetings of council.
Okay. Okay, so we know what we're doing with that, I guess, for the moment. Councillor Ritchie.
Yes, in regards to the Phelps rate board, you put it here, move to operating budget. Can you elaborate further on that?
Yeah, so simply, we put a provisional item in for 2016 as well as 2017 as well as 2018 for $25,000 each year to provide for funds for those rink boards. So I believe the intent would be is by 2018, 2019, we would be likely putting this back into our operating budget and actually committing the funds. So yeah, in 2016, 2017, and 2018 would be the third year of that program. So we would have $75,000 set aside to do that program. Oh. Okay.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Councillor Hannah?
Thank you. Are we going to go down the page, Jeff, as things are set out here in order, just so I don't jump all over?
Correct, yeah. The idea was, you know, to the extent that councillors had a comment regarding projects on the page, then obviously from the top down, we would like to hear some comments in favor and or not in favor.
So I had a question about the 2018, the $40,000 for the library feasibility study. I'm just not sure what the purpose of that is, and I didn't get enough clarification last time. I'm still in doubt. If somebody could explain it to me, I'd appreciate it, because is that to help support the 2019 spending of the $5.5 million, or what? I don't know.
Excuse me. Thank you, through to Councillor Hannah. The purpose of the $40,000 is to do a feasibility study to determine A, if is the facility required, B, the square footage required, C, operating costs, looks at staffing, operating costs, revenue projections, essentially creates a business plan to justify moving to the next step and spending the money to construct it.
I thank you, and I believe that's necessary to do all that stuff, but I guess my bottom line is, do we, sitting here as a council, think that we need to spend $6 million for a new library, even at 2019? It just seems to me that we don't have the growth to consider doing that at this time, and should we be spending the $40,000 is my question to the rest of the council anyway.
I guess my comment on these, that they're in as placeholders, and quite honestly, when we go to next year at this time, we move it. I'm not sure there's benefit moving it now, because it has no immediate impact on our 2017 budget, which is what we're going to narrow down to. So I think we want to get some placeholders in here, and I guess, what's the idea? Kind of go through this and then go to the wish list and see
Correct.
how we plug it back in?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
that's probably the best way of doing it,
Yep.
because then when we get to these long lists, we say yes, no, or, you know, then we, at least you can get a feeling from us. Okay.
So the answer to that would apply to the next one, the $300,000 for some kind of a study to determine whether we're going to spend $21 million for new multi-rec center. Is that similar? It's just a placeholder?
Yes.
No commitment?
No, there's no commitment. I mean, from a, I guess, a DC study, a lot of these things come out of it. But when we sit down and do next year's, we'll move it, quite honestly. Same as, you know, we may move things forward or backwards depending on what's happening at the moment. But I think from a long-term planning perspective, at least if we have numbers in here, it gives finance an opportunity to start guesstimating that, you know, we need more tax or whatever the case may be, or we should be reviewing our DC charges. I think it provides a number of opportunities for us to I guess, plan our financial well-being. So, I mean, they're not in stone until we really get to the budget year when it's all said and done. Is that fair?
And further to that, Mr. Mayor, you're right. It's a plan, and it does provide us with, when we go to do our DC update, we need about a 10 or 6 at least, 10 preferably, years of projects that we plan on looking at over the next 6 to 10 years to include in our DC. So if there are projects where we could actually be collecting DCs, we need some type of game plan in front of us in order to do that. And further to that, keep in mind, and I think you touched on this a little bit, Mr. Mayor, is that it is a plan. In 2017, that's the budget, so we're looking for confirmation from council that yes, you're good with these projects. Even with that said, though, it's just a budget. And so staff still have to come back to council in most cases, depending on the dollar value, with reports recommending whether we proceed with these projects or not. Until we actually go out and tender and or RFP for some of these projects, we don't know what the real cost is going to be to the township. So in some cases, we may be coming back to you saying, we went out to tender, we went out with RFP, and it's over the amount that we budgeted, so what are we gonna do? That's where we would come back and provide some further recommendations as to we can try to find some other funds and or it doesn't go forward and it gets deferred. So again, it is a plan, but 2017 is somewhat of a commitment to, yes, this is what we plan on doing in 2017. But it can change.
Councilor McConkey?
Okay, so then in regards for
2017, I would like to see money taken from the fire station 2 again, because we're talking, and move it forward to some of it has to be into 2017, so I think that there's still a study to see what the cost of a true fire hall is and stuff. We haven't done a feasibility for that, so that needs to be done. So it needs to be moved into 2017, some money like 50, I don't know what do you feel a cost of that would be, Ron?
Don't we have a feasibility study for the fire hall? Because it was out for tender.
Not for
at
a new
time.
one.
No, the joint service, we're not going to do a feasibility study on that. We're going to have to make sure that we design our fire hall that it could be added on to, yes. But I don't think we need another feasibility study. Director Belcourt?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I don't think we need to go through the process of doing a study to determine costs for a new fire hall. We did actually go through the RFP process for the fire hall a year ago, and that has given us gives us a pretty good indication of what a brand new facility of the size required will be.
Well, if we put our stakes in the ground in 2018, do we have any work that we have to do next year that we should be funding for? Because I'm going on the presumption that I'm going to be moving that into 2018, so I need to know the costs that I need in 2017 to prepare for a new fire station in 2018, land acquisition, everything.
CEO Brindley?
To reinforce what Ron had talked about is, first of all, there was a detailed feasibility done. Square footage is required for every types of rooms, all that layout's done, and out of that we did the RFP. Even that building was designed with the ability to add on to it. So in the event that whether it's a partnership with the OPP or even like OPP, other service providers, that building was designed, and a future building could be designed to have that flexibility. But when it comes to the assessment that's already been done, it still is on record in terms of what the needs are, how many square feet, what types of rooms, and all that stuff. It's all in detail, so we don't need that part. No.
Okay, good question, thank you. Moving on.
Yeah, so is there any other,
Councilor McConkey?
project on the first page that council wants to provide some comment on?
See, the curling rink is separate than the multi-purpose, and I feel that the two of them should be together and part of that 300,000 feasibility. I don't know why we would have it isolated.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor McConkey. At this time, we're simply putting dollars set aside for those specific projects. Whether council decides to treat it as a single multi-purpose facility, if you will, that includes a curling rink, that's still subject to further discussion and approval of council. So we didn't want to presume that everything was going to be going in the same location per se. But there has been a lot of talk about whether we are centralizing some of our recreation and or whether we are decentralizing some of our recreation, if you will. So staff has no, we're not making a decision to say it's going in any certain location. I think that's obviously council's decision. So,
Yeah, Director Belcourt, do you want to make any comment on that?
The original feasibility study that looked at the multi-purpose rec center will look at all facets of the operation and components. And as Director Schmidt said, this could be an add-on to the multipurpose facility, because then in doing the feasibility study and the first phase design is to include the flexibility to add on to the facility as we move along in years if additional services and that are required. So it's pre-planned and fitted into the footprint.
Okay, Councillor McConkey?
In the repairs, we talked about the Midhurst Union Cemetery, and I just want, at the last Heritage meeting, it was brought to our attention that there's a cemetery that the township may have to take over, Felton, not Felton.
Vigo.
Yes, and so it was fine, like the Heritage wanted to look at it and stuff, but we have very limited funding. So, you know, to say to them and we don't have Friends of the Heritage. So to do fundraising to try to fix this cemetery, I just want to know, where does that type of money come from? Because I see it here for the Midhurst Union, and I know that we've taken ownership, but I think that we have to plan for something like that cemetery.
So timing is key on everything. So this morning, I actually had a budget, we're entering budget discussions with senior management, and the discussion came up with our clerk's department, who looks after the cemeteries, if you will. And so that discussion exactly came up. And so you'll see when we bring the operating budget in November that we will be putting some money aside in the operating budget for some of these, pioneer cemeteries. We realize that most of the funds that we have for our cemetery is for the Midhurst Union Cemetery, but we are somewhat, to your point, a little obligated, if you will, for some of these pioneer cemeteries. So there will be some money, whether or not it's enough, it's really to kind of maintain it, if you will, and if you will, pretty it up. But if there's major capital works that are required, that's a different story. So.
And because that's not a capital investment, that would be an operating anyways, wouldn't it, on an ongoing, or?
Well, simply I think the idea is to do some cleanup, if you will, on some of those sites, and some of them vary in size. So, you know, we're still trying to figure out what dollar value we should be putting in the budget to accommodate that. Yeah, if any physical capital work has to be done, that will be coming forward in likely future years once we actually understand what we're dealing with. Because I think some of these some of them are just coming to our knowledge at this time, and we're trying to deal with them as best we can. But I think the idea is to go out and actually try to just, for lack of a better term, clean them up a little bit, if you will. So.
Okay.
Is there any other questions regarding the projects on the first page? Any other questions or clarifications from council? No?
So it's moving all these things to the operating budget. Is that the way we've done it before, or have they been capitalized, some of these kind of improvements like painting and that?
Well, what happens is again, not to get too specific, but when we do our financial statements, we have to do a lot of reallocation into operating expenses from capital. So it's, if we can actually, when we do the capital budget, simply have a better understanding of, is it physically capital from our policy standpoint? And so that's the idea, is we will hopefully in the future start to look at the things that are in the capital budget are truly capital from a financial reporting standpoint. And the funding of those things, by moving them to the operating budget, the funding goes with it. So however it's funded in the capital budget, that funding will move into the operating budget and be funded the same way. So if it's from reserves, it'll be from the same reserve.
So what is the typical threshold for capital?
Well, it depends on the category, that's the thing. So, yeah.
I'll leave it at that for now, but I mean, so it is very, okay.
Yeah.
And it's probably helpful to bring that forward so we do have a good understanding what's going into capital. Okay, that's fine.
Sure. Okay, so if we can move to page 2, which is all of the Parks and Recreation related projects. So again, you'll see we've broken it down into the growth-related projects, and then I guess halfway through, or halfway down, you'll see the repairs and replacement type projects. So I know this one came up again at the last meeting, the Midhurst Recreation provisional item, so we do have it back here on the capital. We still need some kind of decision or some kind of direction from council as to are we doing something, are we not doing something with those funds? So I'll leave that for council to decide. If you want, if you have specific questions about the projects that are in front of you, now's the time to maybe dive into those projects. Director Belcourt's here to provide any information that council may want at this time.
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. The splash pad, $300,000 for the year 2017. I know we have this debate again last year, and I can only just remind this council that, and Mr. Belcourt remembers well, we had a group about 2 years ago or 3 years ago come before RAC and before council suggesting they would fundraise for a splash pad, and we felt that it wasn't justifiable, one, and two, that the estimated cost of $50,000 a year to operate it was not affordable either, and it's something that's really not needed given how close, if you like, the northern part of the township is to Wasaga Beach. There's no justification to spend that $300,000 for a splash pad. And I wouldn't support any budget that had that in it.
I guess I have a comment on that. Even though they're very expensive, you know, from the feedback we've got from other jurisdictions, they're well-used facilities, so I guess from the information and feedback we got from other jurisdictions that have them, yes, they're expensive to operate, but one of the better used facilities for recreation they have. So anyway, so I guess we have to decide if we're going to leave it in as a placeholder or not. That's all you want to know.
Yep.
Deputy Mayor Allen.
I concur with Councillor Hannah. I think there are other things that we have to do in priority to splash pads, so my vote would be to push those off into the future, for future consideration.
Good.
Sorry, if I may, the only thing I would caution council on is that, again, some of these projects that are DC funded, they are in our DC background study right now, and we are collecting DCs for them. If they fall off the 10-year window time frame, then actually it could impact the DCs that we collect in the future. So there was a decision that splash pads would be going forward. If we're not going to do that, a splash pad, then we may want to consider some other project because we are collecting DCs for these. So again, I'm not trying to pressure council in that regards. I'm just trying to educate you in the sense that the DC does include them. So for this particular one, for example, it's 90% DC eligible, so we are collecting DCs. And then the remaining 10% we're suggesting would come from our Parkland Reserve Fund. So essentially the capital component of it would not be an expense to the existing taxpayer, but the ongoing operating costs, which are still subject to clarification as to how much it would cost, would fall into the tax base.
Well, then I guess it would be helpful then to see how much we've accumulated, how much it would cost. So an update on the most recent report on what's the initial capital cost on these, realistic, what's the operating cost, how much we do have built up, and how much we would need to borrow to build these things, and what would be the time period to recoup those particular funds, and how possible is it to shift the DC funds related to this to something else similar that is DC eligible, those sorts of things.
So all good questions. I guess from a staff perspective is that when we see it in the budget, those are typically things that we would then, if council is giving us somewhat the vertical nod to proceed, then we would go and we would obtain that information. We would say, okay, council's given us direction to actually look into a splash pad. Let's do our due diligence. Let's find out how much it's going to cost. Potentially go to market and put a tender out there and find out how much it is, and then report back to council and say, this is what it is. This is how it would be proposed to be funded, similar to what's in our capital plan. to your point about the DC, we are going to be doing a DC update in the early part of 2017, in the middle of 2017. So if splash pads are not what this council is supporting, then that would be the opportune time to start to make the change and reallocate outdoor recreation DCs to a different project.
So would your recommendation be to leave it as a placeholder till we do that exercise?
That would be my recommendation, yes.
And I guess following up, and maybe Councillor Hanna wants to speak to this, but wouldn't we now want to consider, just as ideas to you, there's a lot of talk and a lot of discussion and on a pavilion. And of course, we haven't read here pavilion skateboard. Pavilion's probably going to be $350,000. I'm not sure if that's a reasonable number or whatever for a kind of a Minising type, Grenfell type, Hillsdale type pavilion. Should it be plunked into 2017 and shift splash pad 2018? I'm just saying, are these ideas that you want to put out there, so at least it's on a placeholder? Councillor Hand.
Thank you. I understand where you're going, but remember that the residents are fundraising for the pavilion. That's not, it might be taxpayer funded up front, but it'll be paid for back. That's not the situation with splash pads. My other comment further to what the deputy mayor said, there's other things that I think have more priority that would be of greater use to a large portion of our population. I've mentioned before, pickleball is very popular. Well, I've never seen it, never played it. I've talked to people that are very supportive of it. There's a group that we're going to come and make a deputation here, but they haven't bothered us yet. 4 pickleball courts in Midland, I believe, cost $16,000. We could put pickleballs in every part of this township for half of that $300,000 that's on here. So I just think that, while it might be nice to a small portion of the population to have kids running around in a taxpayer-funded pond, the money could be better used, and I would like to see the splash pad just something put to bed. And I would ask our Director of Finance, if there was a will to go with pickleballs throughout this township, could the DC charges be collected for that, and could these DC charges that we've been collecting for a splash pad be converted over for something like that?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hanna, I believe as long as there's a growth component to those, and we don't have pickleball courts today, so I believe in my understanding of the DC, yes, we could reallocate funds towards pickleball courts if that's what council's wish was through the next update. Again, I think we had a conversation about DCs previously, and there's 2 trains of thought. Is that the DC background study that you have in front of you, it does specify specific projects. And so one train of thought is that you only do those projects. So you collect on those projects and you only do those projects. That's one train of thought, and council has to make that decision as to, are you going to stick to that? Or the other train of thought is those are projects that are identified, but if you decide that you don't want to do those projects, and there's other projects that may be eligible, similar to what we're talking about, then you can reallocate dollars in the DC for those. There is that opportunity to do so. It's just council kind of has to say, are you going project specific, or are you going, I can't think of the word right now, a more DC component, service area related. So are you looking at outdoor recreation as a whole, or are you looking at those specific projects within that area? That's really a decision that council has to kind of take. Some are specific to the project. You either do it or you
Appreciate
don't.
that. Sorry, but I think council would have to agree it would be better to have something in every community than have one thing in just one community for a small portion of the population. And I'd be more than happy to suggest the council should give you that direction, or give the Director of Parks and Rec that direction to go and give us some kind of a feedback or report on the the validity of having pickleball versus a splash pad in one community.
Councillor Coghlan.
Perfect. The annual cost of operating was suggested at $50,000. Do you have any idea of what it might today cost annually?
Director Belcourt.
Thank you, through to Councillor Coghlan. If my recollection is correct, it was around 30 to 35,000 annual operating costs. So potentially today it would be approximately 40,000.
And then the other, and I understand that members of council see a splash pad servicing a small, I believe it was small portion of our population, but young families are a large portion of our population, and splash pads are not just for toddlers under the age of 2. When you go to these, there's kids 11, 12, 13, they're all playing together. It's not just a small portion. I would argue that it's an equally small or equally representative as a senior population or whatever the pickleball population. It's servicing a different population. It doesn't mean it's any smaller or less, or it's just a different population. That the idea of a splash pad is supported. I know myself, when I had the kids, I wish that there was somewhere that I could have gone to within our own municipality to meet young families in the area. We don't have that provided to us today. We do have library programs where we can take our kids and go, but there isn't just a non-program. Like if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I want to take my kids somewhere. We have lots of parks, but there's no communal meeting area for young families to socialize together.
Councillor McConkey?
Well, this is really good timing because I had the town hall meeting last night and I met the families that were moving into Stone Manor Woods. And would you believe that when they moved in, on their thing that they've been told is that they were going to have a splash pad. So to see me, remember that they're in the south end, we do not have a lot of recreation facilities for these young families, and we're not going to probably get the multi-purpose rec center for quite a while. So I was just wondering if there is going to be a splash pad, should the earmark be in the south end? Because I would think that a lot of the DCs that have been collected for this has probably come from that area. So I just wanted to be conscious of that. If we were going to have one later in the north, then I would see that something, because I think we have to start to put our stake in the ground in the south. Pickleball, I can't speak to yay or nay to it. I know nothing about it, but it sounds okay, but I know nothing. I leave it to our recreation. All I've heard from my residents and walking around is a few of them have asked for tennis facilities. So that's why I submitted the tennis facility, because the tennis court at Snow Valley Highlands, right now they have a rink, an outdoor rink, and I had been approached by members there too that they would do fundraising if they could have the tennis in the summer. So I left a call for the gentleman. I haven't heard back yet, but the estimation there is 70,000. So I would really like to, this 75,000 in Stone Manor Woods for the first phase isn't sufficient for me in Ward 4. I need more funding in Ward 4, and I ask this council to sort of start to take an approach to Ward 4 and recreation as to the new development, the new families, and that we provide something for them. I know that in talking to the director of recreation last night, they're looking more at passive, and we'd even talked about we can go and talk to the people. But if we're going to leave that 300,000 for a splash pad, I'd like to leave it in Ward 4.
There is one, obviously, and I think what you're suggesting, there's one in 2021, and you're suggesting that should be moved forward.
Well, it's in their diagram. They bought the home with this.
Tell them to build a splash pad then.
That's what it was a splash pad. Yeah. Was what they saw in their diagram, which the director said, well, that's just a concept, but this is what the people moved in and thought. So we have to be careful of what we're putting out to these people. And the other thing that I have a bit of an issue with is the trail from Grenfell Community Center to Parr Boulevard, 10,000. That should actually be on here as part of DC charges or a development contribution, because that we received as a contribution. And I've been told It was supposed to be done before, but we missed it with the last expansion of the Sunnydale Road, but it's supposed to be done after we've done this work at the county. So it needs to be moved into 2017, because the residents have been waiting. I don't know how long Par Boulevard subdivision has been there, and that's why I do not want to leave my residents that are now moving into Stone Manor Woods without anything.
Director Belcourt, you want to comment?
Okay, with regards to the trail from Grenfell to Par Boulevard, that has been in the plan for several years. We've just pulled it out until we know we're going to move it forward. And it does look like the works are going to be completed shortly, so it would be advisable to move it into 2017. And if I can just answer the question with pickleball and the request that came through Councillor Hanna, I have been speaking with the gentleman involved that put forward the request. And as a trial, we are going to mark out the concrete pad up at the Glen Huron Park at his suggestion. That would be a great venue to try. And if that works on that sports pad, we can do it on several other sports pads throughout the township for essentially a gallon of paint and a couple of nets.
Okay, let's start. Councillor Ritchie.
Mayor French, in regards to, through you, Mayor French, to Ron, the Sports Hall of Fame, the addition there, $750,000. Are we redoing the bathrooms, or are we putting new bathrooms in? That's one question.
That would be putting in new washrooms. That was part of the Ontario 150 capital grant that we submitted, council approved for us to submit.
And did we get approval on that?
Still waiting to hear. So that project's dependent on that grant funding.
Mayor French, $750,000 to start in 2017, whether we get the approval or not. It'd be nice if we delayed the Sports Heritage addition, and I think refocus them funds back towards the three other communities that I think needs the funding, whether we look at the boards in Hillsdale, whether we look at Phelpston, whether we look at the ice rink in Hillsdale, or in Midhurst, that I know that's been much debated. And I agree with the deputy mayor. Look at something where more use is going to be used, and these ice pads with the roofs over them are used year-round. And so to delay this and tackle the other issues that are facing us, and we keep ignoring it. You asked for our wish list, I gave it, and I don't see nothing showing up here. So the $750,000, I have a hard time supporting that. So, and I don't care if it's in the rec, I don't care where it is, $750,000, and I think we could readdress that somewhere else a lot better.
Director Belcourt?
Again, that project is dependent on the grant application that was submitted with council's approval to move forward. And the sports heritage component is a very small part of that overall project. If you recall, it was new accessible washrooms, additional change rooms that are accessible both for the sledge hockey and for participation by women, as we do need additional washrooms or change room areas now because we lack the space to be able to accommodate the teams that are coming in there now that have both male and female participants.
Yeah, and since it is a specific application, you can't take that $750 and put it somewhere else.
Well, just to clarify, the way we've had it in the budget is that the $750 would be debentured at this stage, and the reason why we did that is because it's dependent on the grant. So if the grant doesn't happen, then we likely will not be coming to council with a request for $750 to be debentured, so.
But, Mayor French?
Yes.
Still, whether we debenture it or not, let's assume we debenture it. We're instead of dealing with one issue, we're dealing with 3 or 4 other issues, and where there's more use, just as much use. So, like, I was at the fair last night setting up, and, you know, it's clean, it's painted, You know, you look around, you see things. Hell of a nice little facility up there. And they do a great job looking after it. That's our model to the world. That's our showpiece. It's great accessibility. People come from all over to play hockey. I was a hockey dad for 10 years, and trust me, I was in places there, hell, you had to have mountain boots on to get in there, but we got a great facility there. And it's well looked after, but there's other areas that need to be addressed. So we're going to borrow the money, let's do it wisely and go to the areas that's affected. That's my thing.
Councillor Coghlan and then Deputy Mayor Allen.
I agree with Councillor Ritchie that this is our showpiece, and this is the most used facility by the most people in our municipality. It is not accessible. If you're in a wheelchair, or if you have a stroller, you actually can't watch the game. Even our benches, there's a step up to our benches. You've been out in the bleachers, they go up and down. If you have a daughter playing hockey in Elmvale, there is nowhere for her to change. If you are another team coming to Elmvale with a female on the team, there is nowhere for that person to change. If you are a sledge hockey player, our washrooms are not, I don't want to say they're not accessible, they need to be more accessible in my opinion. And when you're at the arena at a time in the early morning or late at night when there isn't teams, yeah, it looks great. But when you're there, when there's a team coming on the ice, a team coming off the ice and something going on upstairs, you can't move in there. Like it is, which is a great thing. It's nice to have it packed full of grandparents and young children, but we have to invest in that. It needs to be more accessible. There's no argument with that. And the Sports Heritage Hall of Fame, it's a room. There's nothing shiny or Taj Mahal about it. It's simply a room where we can display our heritage of sports in the only facility we have in our municipality. So that does not need to go anywhere, and it needs to be something supported by this council.
Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor French. Just process, Director Schmidt. We're trying to figure out a way that we can make this document as accurate and meaningful after many attempts as possible presently. Now we see an example of something that, and I'm sure there are many other examples, that is DC eligible, amounts are built up, and we're suggesting keep it as it is, but place market for the DC study sometime next spring. I mean, there'll be a lot of examples of that that I would imagine in this document. So we're mixing old and maybe undesired information remaining there and not really understanding how transferable this DC funding reserve might be with respect to individual items. My question is how can we figure out a way to accelerate, to make this document the most meaningful and make our decisions the most effective at this point in time?
I guess further to the CAO's suggestion, I think on a go-forward basis, we need to have special meetings of council where basically resolutions will have to be passed and decisions can be made. Obviously, the format of having a working session is not getting us in the direction that we need to go, I think. The intent is to have some fulsome discussion about the projects that are being proposed here based on a number of studies that have been done in the past, whether it be DCs or whether it be the Parks and Rec Master Plan or whether it be in other areas, roads need studies and so on and so forth. So staff has tried to put together a 6-year capital plan that's based on a lot of those things as well as their expertise, whether it be in the area of parks and recreation, the individuals that are serving on the front line, if you will, similar to our roads. Those individuals serving on our front line do have some input into roads that need to be replaced or suggested to be replaced. So that's where this information comes from. We presented to council, and obviously there's some other projects that council would like to see on the list, and we need to consider some of those. But with all due respect, if it's only one councillor or two councillors that are requesting an item, we need the majority of council to support that item, if you will. If we add one item for every one of you, we're going to have a laundry list, and to be honest with you, you may not all agree to those items, right? What we're proposing to you is based on studies that have been approved in the past and have been received in the past. We do need some direction from this council as to what do you think, what are your plans going forward. again, this is based on information. It's not pie in the sky stuff. It is based on reports and studies that have been conducted. Whether you agree or disagree, that's where the information is coming from.
Well, I think from a parks, or from a roads perspective, I don't think you're going to get much debate or dispute from us, because we'll look to Public Works and other staff to recommend, and we'll probably agree as a council. But for Parks and Recreation, that's something that we probably have more of an opinion on, and we're trying to decide as a council what, from the master rec plan, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, or how it needs to be adjusted. So I think that's, Parks and Recreation are probably the area that we're, be most disputed potentially.
Yeah, I guess maybe to help move this along, my suggestion is, let's kind of complete this sheet, but let's go to the wish list.
If I may, is there anything on page 2 that you absolutely do not agree with, you do not want to see on here? I think that's kind of what we're looking for, is some comments on, obviously there's some concerns about the splash pad, so staff will go back and take those comments into consideration. But are there other things on page 2 so that when we come back to you in November, it's not a total, oh my God, we should have removed that?
Councillor Hanna.
Thank you. Signage, $37,500. I believe that's tax funded, and it's in every year up to a total of $222,000. I can't support that. I didn't support it last year, and we've had a lot of conversations about signs in the past 6 months here at this council table. But anybody's driven through our township that's noticed some of these signs, and the best example is driving through Edenville. I think there's other things we can be spending our taxpayers' dollars on than $37,500 for signs at parks. The parks already have signs there. People know where the parks are. One argument one councillor made last time was, well, the fire service needs to know where the park is. Well, if you're close enough to read the sign, you can see the park, and the fire service agreed with that. So I won't support a budget again that has $37,500 in it for signs we don't need.
Councillor Ritchie.
Maybe this is off topic, but what the deputy mayor was talking about, maybe we should be going to the Public Works Department and asking them to relook what the numbers that we've been aggressive for the last 5 years. Every year for the last 5 years, we bought snowplow trucks at $235,000 apiece. Maybe we should delay that for a couple of years.
Okay, we're talking about the recreation budget.
I know.
Let's not mix apples and oranges.
I'm just saying that in order to get our Parks and Rec fixed up, maybe we need to let them shelve that for a couple of years and get what we want done in Parks and Rec, and then we'll go back to the Public Works Department and say, now proceed. And that might be something we might have to look at too, before our tenure's up.
Yeah, let's deal with the recreation budget. Deputy Mayor Allen?
I just meant to ask a question before. For the 216 approved, have any of these been done or in the process of being done?
Yes, I'll comment at a high level, but Director Archer and Director Belcourt would know better than myself, but I believe the majority of the projects that were slated in the 2016 capital budget are either completed and or underway. There may be one or two that may not be proceeding in 2016, but am I off base there?
Including the 325,000 steel roof retrofit at...
That's underway currently.
Director Belcourt, do you want to make a high-level comment?
No, Director Schmidt is absolutely correct. The majority of the projects are on their way. 2 are just being reviewed now, and we've got, I believe, 1 more to address.
So, if we look at this, let's continue. As Director Schmidt said, is there anything that you'd like taken off this that, so there can be comments and brought forward when we do the budget and table resolutions that we can give them some solid direction when they're pulling their budget together? Councilor McConkey.
I just have concerns too with the 300,000 because I believe some of it's coming from reserve funds, and I believe in order to do the addition for the fire hall, we are using fire reserves, and there's supposed to be payment back. So where do we see the payment of capital back from Parks and Rec to fire next year towards that addition?
Sorry, just to clarify, you're
It won't be
speaking
next
to,
year, they won't start paying each year a little bit?
you're speaking to Fire Station 2?
Yeah.
The first item? So essentially what we've decided, or what we're proposing is that the project is eligible for DCs, but we don't have enough DCs in fire to actually move forward with it.
Correct.
So, but we do have funds in the fire reserve to move forward. The idea would be is as we collect fire DCs, we would be repaying the fire reserve with those DCs.
Okay, but there was also an additional comment, because the fire facility that we're building is going to be, in the end, used for recreation, storing stuff, and public works, that they were going to pay back that, it wasn't, they were going to pay back that reserve, not the DC. So where's that money? When does that start to be allocated back?
Yeah, so simply what would happen is that we do collect DCs for public works and fleet, and so it is in the DC background study right now, so we are collecting funds. So if and when the decision is made that essentially public works and parks would be taking over that facility and fire would be moving on, that would be the time when we start to actually pay from the public works DC to the fire DC. Yeah.
One last question.
Follow up?
To the Director of Recreation, will the 300,000, does that include washrooms or change rooms for the splash pad? And also the operational cost at 40,000, does that include the water costs, or is that just the maintenance from the staff?
Director Belcourt?
The 300,000 would be strictly the splash pad. There'd be no amenities buildings with it. And the operational cost included the water.
Councillor McConkey?
Okay, I think that we do have to consider some washroom facilities when we're trying to look at a splash pad. I'd like to hear if others do or don't, but it's something that you might want to consider if you're looking that way. I don't know if I really believe in a splash pad, but I do believe in what Councillor Coughlin said about the washrooms, and we do need to have facilities for women playing hockey, so I do support that. And I know it's part of a grant, so it's still pending a grant. So, but if the grant doesn't follow through, are we spending money then of our own, of capital, to do the washrooms for the change rooms so that female people can, because otherwise, maybe we should be doing some of that splash pad money and making sure that the washrooms happen.
Oh, shoot.
One's a replacement too, yeah, so. So,
Okay, CEO Brindley?
Through the mayor, I can't speak to all splash pads, but a lot of the splash pads that I've seen installed are in close proximity to other facilities. So it's rare that you see a splash pad on its own have facilities, because they're often put in close proximity to another rec center or something else that would have facilities. But once again, I haven't seen all of them, but most of the ones I've seen, they're co-located, if you will.
Okay, so I figure we have another 5 minutes here, because we want to take a little break. And so can I suggest we jump right to the wish list? And if we look at the Phelpston Pavilion, Councillor Ritchie, what year would you like to see that? Forgetting about the boards for a moment.
Next year.
Okay, is that 2017?
Or 18.
Oh, well, pick a number just so we can have some guidance to staff.
218.
Okay. Midhurst, Councillor Hannah, because I know, now, one thing you said is obviously, I don't think the Midhurst residents are going to raise 100% of the cost of it. They're probably going to raise 50% of the cost, and they probably want to borrow that 50% when they build it. Okay, just so, because I think you said they're paying for it. Well, I think they're paying for half of it, correct?
I don't know, that's not my understanding from conversations, I believe that you put forward saying how they did this in Grenfell and so on, that the residents fundraised for the whole thing, so I thought that was a
No,
requirement.
I did not say that.
I misunderstood you.
Okay, yeah. Basically, the residents in those areas, they raised half of it.
No, they raised it all of it. We raised it all. There was a loan from council. When Frank Reed and
Director Belcourt.
Part of the project we're having.
No, the Grenfell Pavilion was a 50-50 partnership. Hillsdale was, I believe, 60-40 because of some other issues that went on. Minnesing was completely different because of other things that had happened, but the last major projects that we've done have been on a 50-50 share.
Anyway, you just confirmed my recollection, because I happen to be chair of the
And if I may, I
board at the
apologize,
time.
because that was my
Okay, yeah.
understanding.
So anyway, but what you're saying for budgetary, that obviously, whatever the number is, and if it's next year or 2018, you pick a year, just so we can discuss it when we get to budget, where would you like to see it?
Well, I know the residents are fundraising, and they have been for the last year or two, so I think 2017 would be a nice time to put it in there. I'm
Okay,
not sure
well,
they'll have half of it done by then, but keep in mind too that while it might be 50% now, it is an asset that ends up being owned by the taxpayers of Springwater, so they're getting a good deal if the people fundraise for it.
No, that's fine. Okay, so we've taken care of that one? Yes. Councillor McConkey.
I don't understand why a Midhurst Pavilion and rink pad is less money than a Phelpston Pavilion. I don't understand why one's 150 and one's 200. Who put the costs in?
No, I think these numbers, the numbers have to be plugged in. Yeah, because, no, you're right. I agree. But let's move on to the next one. Anton Mills, actually, I guess it's Councillor Austin, but I know I had some discussion with the chair very briefly, and I'm not sure if they're going to come forward in Anton Mills, because they do have that outdoor ice rink. Is there an interest? I don't know, Councillor Colligan could speak to that. Is there any interest in the next few years of having rink boards in a covered pavilion?
There is an interest in the rink boards, especially. We're basically thinking baby steps. I mean,
right.
in order to fundraise for something that has not been an initiative, but the opportunity to have the rink covered as a pavilion. Like right now, we do have a pavilion for people, but rink boards is first and foremost, and then. But I guess that would be kind of backwards if you're doing it. So the placeholder for the Anton Mills Pavilion and rink boards, the pavilion would be ice covered. Like we have a pavilion, so I just want to make sure that that's clear. We don't need to replace our pavilion.
So are you, just so we have some numbers that we can at least kind of debate and pass resolutions, are we, so you'd start with rink boards, then pavilion, or?
Right, through you to Director Belcourt. When you are putting rink boards up, you can put boards up and then fundraise for a roof over it. I just want to make sure that when we're using the word pavilion in Anton Mills, we do have a pavilion, so that it's not like replacing it or maintaining it. It would be a new roof over the ice rink is what we're.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, so pick a year.
2016,
Pick another year.
2017.
Okay, well, let's use that number and see where it goes. And of course, that would be dependent, same as talking about.
2018 is more
Midhurst,
reason. Like we
okay.
haven't even started fundraising, so 2018 is.
Okay, so 2018, that's good. And the splash pads, I mean, we have them in here. I guess we'll have to decide when we go to the budget, take them out, whatever the case may be. And quite honestly, further to Councillor McConkey, maybe they're reversed in the priority that they're on this list or whatever, or maybe they just come right off. But we'll vote on those. Obviously, community hall, I'm not, I think we have to decide on a long-term rec and what's happening with the multi-use recreation center before we talk about that. Stone Manor, Councillor Austin has names beside a lot of these, but is there any thoughts from Councillor McConkey, since it is your ward, since we do have one in Grenfell, would you see possibly the consideration down the road, maybe 5 years down the road, of a pavilion-type structure in Stone Manor? I'm not sure where we put it.
That's the problem, is I don't know about the real estate, that we have enough real estate for when we do proper working parks and stuff. So I think that the director of Recreation and I were talking last night, like, we'd like to meet with the people in Stone Manor, and see what they want. Like, they're new. I think that you're right, like, we have to put some money there, and it has to be earmarked fairly soon. But I think next year will be sort of like, what's feasible, what's your vision for it?
Do you want to pick another, like, and just say for the sake of arguing, for this exercise, 2020? Do you want to use that? It's just,
Yeah.
just so we have it, because we can move the numbers anywhere after next year.
But, we don't want to, I guess this is where we got to go back to the rec plan. You don't want to keep building more community halls if we're going to build a multi-recreation, when I look here and we're in debt for everything. So it's nice to wish, but I need the money in my pocket too. So I got to have a reality check here. So I hope everyone else isn't being greedy too, but I hear everybody else wanting stuff, so I may as well say 2020 and it can come off, but we don't really have money.
No, I think the idea for this exercise at least plugs,
Like, I don't really, so we have to go through the recreation exercise and see where we're.
okay.
After the feasibility study.
Okay, so for the sake of argument, then, because we can move it in, out, cancel it, or whatever.
After feasibility.
Okay, and we've already talked about kind of Phelpston, Hillsdale, rink boards. Councillor Ritchie. 2019 maybe, because they have they do have a nice pavilion and a nice surface. Okay. Didn't mind. And tennis courts.
2017.
I think you may have to move that or we'll be bankrupt at the end of 2017. 17, 18, Director Schmidt, and we'll move it around. Yeah. Okay, well, does that help you move forward?
There's the last page.
Oh, then on to the long page.
What I tried to do, Mayor French, is combine the rolling capital plan with the long-range financial plan suggestions with some asks or some potential asks. So really what's required is to go through some lines here, but I think we're.
Yes. CEO Brindley?
I just think that this page needs to be, it was delivered, I think, to council and needs to be considered by council for future discussions. It shouldn't be discussed today, I have to be very honest. There are items on this list that shouldn't be here today.
Okay. Director Belcourt.
Just going back to the previous page, there is one item that it looks like it's the same for Phelpston, but Councillor Ritchie had asked for a small addition or / pavilion and bleachers for O'Neill Park as well. Just a small one, similar to what's at Ant Mills, and I'm envisioning a
Yes.
piece on the end similar
Mayor
to the
French.
Ball Diamond in Elmville.
So since you moved the bigger one out, so when are you suggesting that one?
I find that to be a little heavy on the price, so like, I think we could do that for about half that, what we're asking here, so.
Okay, okay, so
Wanted to
the
make sure
small
you got
pavilion,
bleachers.
the year?
Same as the one at Homer Barrett Park.
And I think that it's also important to note that,
Where to sit when you're doing the horseshoe.
and I think it's also important to note that the pavilions and the initiatives we do have them as placeholders so that we can fund them if the community comes forward.
Yes.
But we're not just going to magically pop up a pavilion everywhere. It's going to be a community initiative to come forward, but to make sure that we've budgeted to have the money set
Half
aside
of
to
it.
support the communities through their initiatives.
Okay, Councillor McConkey, and then we are going to kind of adjourn this meeting because we're
On
running out
that,
of
then,
time.
do we show that we have half of the funding placeholded? I think that would be reasonable, eh? On some of these? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because we have, even in the exercise, we borrow and pay back. Okay, well, do you have a little more guidance
Yeah,
there to move along?
Thanks, so.
Okay, thank you. So we'll be convening their council meeting in 10 minutes. And we have a photograph, and I invite all council coming out. We're going to do the ceremonial check to the food bank. If we can do it out there, and Nicole's all ready, if we would like to go to the lobby right now, please.